Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out of this amazing agenda to join our session. And this is Staying Relevant. Are you ready for the learner of the future? And I'm Liz Dietz, here from Workday, and I'm honored to have this great panel, which I'll introduce in a moment. And, I want to just check in with all the people in the audience. So now some of you are investors in disruptive technology. Any investors here that we have here? A couple. And some of you may be faculty or administrators or staff people that actually use disruptive technology. Any of those here? Yeah, all right, good, perfect. And then some of you are also building technology. So I hope we have a few of those people here today. Excellent. So we're going to be speaking to all of you, in our panel today. So let's face it, in higher education, we have a lot of big problems that we're focused on solving. We're focused on solving, student retention, student success, student engagement. How do we really, we're focused on bridging the gap between education and occupation, helping graduates find jobs. So there's a lot of big problems to solve, and I think I'm speaking for all of us when I say, no matter what role you are here today, we all have some really big ideas, right? So the challenge is that we're facing, and I think many of you are facing, is trying to balance the needs of either the investors, the folks using the products, maybe helping you design your products, as well as your challenges as you're building products, balancing those needs with the needs of the ultimate end user. And in case there's a mystery, we're here to talk about the students today, the learners of the future. So balancing those needs when you're building products, delivering products, can be very challenging. And the irony there is that we find the people most passionate about making a difference for students, the people that are most interested in their students' success, are often the reason why when the products get in the hands of the students, they sometimes miss the mark. And it's just a challenge because there's a disconnect between what we need and what the students actually need. So how do you solve for that problem? And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. How do you solve that problem and really focus on the needs of the student, who's the ultimate end user, but then also balance the needs of those either paying for the product or using the product. And what we've found is the way to do that is to really, first of all, identify who is your end user. So our premise today is that it's the student. The student is the end user. And they're the ones we're building products for and hoping to support. So you've got to balance those needs with the people using it and paying for it. But to do that, you've got to put the past aside. You need to forget the way you've always done things. And for many of us, if you're using a legacy system, I assert that in those days, I was involved then, that you're designing from the inside out. You're designing from the administrator's point of view rather than the end user, because we didn't really have smartphones and students working on the internet 20 and 30 years ago. So today, you've got to forget all those things the way you think you need to do them, all of your policies, your procedures. This is just how we do it. Our faculty would never accept anything else. Put those things aside. I'm not saying they're not relevant, but put them aside and really focus on the end user. Keep that end user top of mind. And we promise that if you do that, it'll be worth it. So I'd like, before I introduce our panel, we have a short little video we want to show you. And at Workday, where we're all from, one of our core values is fun. Now, we take our products, and especially our customer success, really seriously. But ourselves, not so much. So in the interest of fun, we have a short video we're going to show you, and I think this will, in a fun way, illustrate some of the challenges that your students trying to use the solutions they might be having. So let's roll the video.
And I have successfully registered for Aeronautical Engineering 101.
Is that the Friday at 9?
How do you know?
I'm assuming you've already taken Intro to Spatial Dynamics.
Is that a prerequisite? Because I didn't see in the catalog here.
I'm pretty sure it is. Let me just check my student administration documentation.
How in the world do you know what you're doing with that thing?
Oh, I just use this.
Oh, so you have that to reference, to help you with...
This helps me reference
Yeah,
this, which references this.
Yes,
which
and then I can look at
ultimately
the
references
codes.
that.
Okay. You know what, I'm just gonna call the student records office. They can probably help me.
Yes, that way they can remail you the documentation that you need.
They have email now?
No, I said remail. It should only take a couple of days.
Student Records, how can I help you?
Yeah, I was just calling to see if you could remail me my latest student records.
Oh, of course. I just need you to fill out a record request form, print it out, and drop it by our office, along with a cashier's check for $75.
$75?
Yeah?
Thank you.
Check your messages. I just sent you something.
What is this?
That is a link to a map to a building where you'll stand in line to stand in another line to get into the office where you can get the paperwork that you need to fill out your documentation.
Oh, great.
Simple.
By the way, how's your financial aid registration going?
Not great, not great. I filled out all the paperwork, but I couldn't figure out how to use a fax machine.
None of us can.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if you had to dial a 1 first and then the area code, and I think there's a 9 maybe.
Did it go
I think so. I remember that
Well,
sound.
if it did that sound, it probably went through, and you put a cover sheet.
What's a cover sheet?
Now, I hope I didn't offend any registrars in the room. And you know, before we go on, I'm wondering if we could get the side door closed because there's a lot of noise coming in. I don't want that to come up on the video. Anyway, so I want to introduce our panel now. And you know, we have a lot of fun with that video. And of course, obviously, it's overstating things a bit. But I think when you hear some of the things our panel has to say, maybe not as much as we people maybe of my generation who've been around in this business a long time would like to think. It's actually quite humbling when you hear some of these comments. So I have this great panel here today of 3 folks joining me from Workday. All of them are working on a product that we've built called Workday Students. Good name. And they're all either engineers or product managers. Their background are all engineers. So let's start with, first of all, let's have you panel introduce yourselves, say who you are, what you do, and then share with the audience a little bit about your experience when you were a student. Because as you can see by looking at them, they don't look like they're that far removed from the world of being a student. So go ahead, why don't you start, Dylan?
Sure, thanks Liz. Good morning everyone. My name is Dylan Pavelko. I'm a senior product manager on Workday Student, and most recently I've been focused on our student records and academic advising products. And one of the things that I love about working on those products is inevitably when I'm out in the world with my peers, the question comes up, so what do you do? And I say, oh, I work on software for higher education to help with their administrative needs like course registration, admissions, degree audit. And universally the response is like, oh, thank goodness. Like, I went to X school and it was so bad. They really need a better system. And no matter who I talk to, that's the reaction I get. So it's really gratifying to know that, universally, that's kind of the improvement that we'll be trying to give to students. And that was my experience too. I went to a school where they really tried their best to create the best experience for us, throughout our entire life cycle. But when I was trying to register it in my first winter quarter, I had the lucky registration appointment time of 7 in the morning. And so I woke up early, or at least early for me, and I was looking at my classes that were filling up, and I go to register and I have a hold. So I poke around the system and I see what the hold is about, and it says it's a health hold. So I call the health center. Health center isn't open until 8 a.m. So I wait until 8 a.m. and I see my classes filling up, and I call the health center at 8 a.m. and they say, oh, you need to send us an immunization form. All you have to do is fax it to us and we could lift the hold. And just like the video, I'm like, fax it to you? Like, what are you talking about? Luckily, I went to college where I grew up, so I was living at home. Mom had a fax machine. She knew how to use a fax machine, and so I was able to get my hold lifted. But those are just kind of the experiences that, are still really relevant, actually. And we'd like to not have those experiences be the experience of students today.
Michael?
Thank you, Liz. Hi, good morning. My name is Michael Waddington. I'm also on Liz's team as a product manager. I've been with the company almost 3 years now. I do a lot of work in the student record space around academic calendar, student records conversions, that kind of fun stuff. And I've experienced a lot of the pain points that Dylan experienced as well, but my mistake was thinking that these pain points were going to go away. That I came into college a young, fresh 17-year-old, and of course I was going to have difficulties acclimating to how higher ed technology was going to work, but I would figure it out eventually. And unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be the case. After my bachelor's experience, I went straight into grad school, and part of that transition was I needed to turn in what classes I'd planned to take during grad school. And I knew that I took a couple classes during my undergrad that were going to be applicable, but nowhere in my student portal information was that remotely available. So, okay, I took the walk down to the admin building, went up to the second floor, and found the little window right there, the little help desk, and I tell them my problem, and they slide me a business card just like that for a man named Ivan, and then disappeared back into the distance. So I had to take my little business card for Ivan, and I went back to my computer, and I sent Ivan an email, and I explained to him my situation. And Ivan was great. I loved Ivan. Ivan told me the 2 classes that I needed to take and apply to my graduate degree, but I wasn't done yet because I needed to then find that form online. So I had to Google it to find back into my portal where the form actually was located, find a printer, print the form out, put all the classes on there, and I had to go to the little room that was printed on the very bottom of the form where the office was. So I get to the office, and I know it's the wrong place because there's a big sign up top that says Alumni Affairs. Well, I'm not an alumni yet. I'm trying to get to that point, but I'm trying to turn in this form so I can do my graduate study first. So they had no idea where the grad office had actually moved to, so I went back to the admin building where they told me where the grad office had moved, just so I can get there and finally turn in my piece of paper. All of this work, I'd never set foot into a graduate class yet. I was just trying to get to the point where I could take my graduate classes, and I had to go through all of these hoops and all of these steps, and I knew that even a bachelor's degree was not enough to figure out how to turn in what classes I wanted to take the next term.
Thanks, Michael. Aditi?
Hi everyone, I'm Aditi Agarwal and I'm a software development manager on Workday Student. So unlike my colleagues over here, I'm actually more on the engineering side instead of the product management side, but we all share very similar experiences of not knowing how our student system should work. So I entered into college as a computer science major, and I grew up in the Bay Area, so I figured I knew a lot about technology. I thought I was ready to work my student system, and I actually wanted a very well-rounded college experience. So I had to take a freshman writing seminar my first semester freshman year. So during pre-enroll for my classes, I decided to go for this upper-level Shakespeare course, thinking that it would fulfill that freshman writing seminar experience for myself and get those credits for me. And I walk into class. It's my first class at my first semester on my first day of college, and I walk in. There's like 10 seniors. They're all English majors, and I'm the lone freshman who is a computer science major in engineering. And they all give me a confused look, like, what is she doing here? And to be honest, I didn't know the answer either. I didn't know there were prerequisites to the classes that I had to take, and so I went back home and I immediately dropped the class. And so it was kind of embarrassing for me to have that be my first experience at college. And so by my senior year, my friends and I, we were taking the software engineering course, and so we decided to do something to change this experience up. And so we built this tool for our university to help manage how students would fulfill their requirements for their classes and kind of map out their 4 years, because when we were going through college, we were just maintaining long spreadsheets of all the classes we had to take, planning out our 4 years, hoping that those classes would still be offered during those 4 years, during the semesters we had plotted out. And it ended up being a great tool just for our specific major, but we knew that there was more we could do, and I found this experience to be pretty common amongst a lot of different students at universities, where they're building tools to kind of help them meet those needs that they didn't feel that they were met.
Yeah, well, you know, thank you. These are great experiences, and the thing is that these are the same experiences or similar experiences that we hear from we've heard from hundreds of students that have been engaged in our usability studies. We work with a number of universities in, designing our product, and we hear over and over again that these are the kinds of experiences that they have. And it's really through no fault of anyone, but the administration and all of the rules and regulations and the advising rules are so complex that it's really difficult to navigate. And let's face it, these kinds of students, the students that you're serving, are digital natives. And they've grown up using technology. They may be able to use technology better than some of us, over a certain age in the room. And they're used to going onto their smartphone, using an application that recognizes who they are, knows what their preferences are, remembers what they've done before, has learned what their behaviors are, and will help recommend and guide them. So for all of us, if you're expecting to create something that is going to really support your end user, giving them anything less than what they're used to is really going to be a disservice and ultimately get in the way of them achieving their academic goals. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of designing products. So panel, let's talk about the challenges of building a new solution from the ground up with the student's perspective in mind. So who'd like to jump in there?
Yeah, I can go first.
Okay, great.
So some of the challenges that we face from a technical perspective are performance, preserving data integrity, and obviously designing mobile first. So thinking about performance, we mentioned registration here. Dylan just went through that registration experience and it was kind of traumatic for him and for a lot of students as well, where we know that we're going to be anticipating thousands of students to be using our system at one time during their enrollment window. And so we really have to make sure that they're not stuck on a loading screen where the circle is just spinning or that it's going to crash on them. And we really want to develop something that will help them feel secure in their class schedule and not feeling like they're uncertain about what their fate is going to be at university, because a lot of the classes that they're trying to take are required for them to graduate. In addition, we also think a lot about preserving data integrity. I work on a student financials team, and some of the information we work with is very secure. So things like billing information, your credit card information, how much money a parent might earn. We want to make sure that security is at the forefront of our minds as we always develop, and making sure that all of those are secure in our system. And you also want to make sure that all of the amounts that we show on all of the pages, for example, what a student might owe, is always consistent throughout all of your screens. And now, finally, we think about mobile. Liz was mentioning mobile, and I feel like this has been a consistent theme throughout this conference as well, that the modern student and the modern learner is always on their phone. I know Michael last night was mentioning that we spend over 3 hours on our phone every day, and modern students are so accustomed to having everything at the touch of their fingertips, right? They have Venmo, where they're literally just passing each other money back and forth, and they feel really comfortable in doing that. And so having a student system do that would be really nice. I know when I was in college, when I was thinking about my class schedule, I had to type into my phone a website with a link that wasn't designed for mobile. It was really just designed for desktop. And so I had to take a screenshot of what I was working with and then zoom in into my classes to see the exact location of where they were based off of a screenshot. And I just don't think that's the way the modern student really wants to work anymore. They really want everything to be at the touch of their fingertips.
Yeah.
Right, and if I could just comment on that really quickly. I know there's a false notion out there. It's not ubiquitous, but I know I get it from my parents and certainly my grandparents, is that kids these days, they're just always on their phones, they're lazy, they just want stuff done for them. When I hear things like that, I really think that the message that the mission that we're really trying to push here is that students, they're not lazy, they're not glued to their phones because they want people to just do things for them. Like, oh, we'll just do your program completion application yourself, and we'll handle your plan. You just want us to do things for you. It's really about empowering the student to do the things that they want to do themselves. And I'm going to use taxes as an example because it's tax day. Surprise! Hopefully that didn't catch you guys off guard. When you're doing your taxes, by necessity, the tax code is complex. There's a billion different flavors of company you could have. You could be self-employed. There's all different kinds of ways that you'd have to interact with the taxes, and so by necessity, those rules are very complex. But we don't ask you to sit down with, the 800-page document of the tax code and flip through with your 1040 long form and do it all yourself, because you just want to understand how you fit into that big, complex world of taxes. And so that's why there's big, fancy tools out there to help you log on online. You just type in your information, it fills out this stuff for you, and you're not asking for someone to hold your hand, you're just asking to understand your relationship to that experience. And so when we deal with the students and institutions, we understand that also by necessity, higher ed institutions are complex. You have colleges, sub-colleges, different departments, different calendars, financial aid is in the mix, it's complex. But students are just trying to understand their relationship to that scenario. They don't want their hands held, they just want to understand their relationship, and that's really what we're hoping to do by providing these mobile experiences, these technology pieces that students are expecting, so that they can better that relationship that they have with your institution.
So, Michael, just building on those comments, what's an example of how student expectations have helped shape some of your mobile designs?
Coming from the student record space, I would say a lot of the work we've done around eligibility for classes is one of my favorite areas to point to. And I can think of multiple examples of when I was in college, bump into a buddy, he's taken math whatever, and it sounds really cool. To know if I'm eligible for math whatever, I have to go back to my binder, and I have to look out my course catalog, flip through, find the class, see what the prereqs are, go find my piece of paper I've had since freshman year where I've got highlighted the boxes of classes that I've actually taken as part of my major, see if I have in fact taken the prereqs, and then maybe see if any other requirements have shaken out in there. It's a big, long process just to see if I'm eligible to attain more knowledge from my school. The school knows the classes I've taken. The school knows what the prerequisites are. Why can't we package that information into a nice mobile interface? The student whips out their phone, looks up the class, boom. I'm eligible for it. I can add it to my plan for next term, and it's as easy as that. We haven't done anything, we haven't taken any power away from the student. We've just exposed the data to them in a manner that makes it more consumable.
So that's one of the ways you're helping sort of reinvent and solve those really annoying problems of, needing to bounce around with bumping up against all the regulations. Well, Dylan, how about you?
Kind of when I just think about the challenges of bringing, this new experience to students, there's a lot of change involved, right? And everyone in this room, I suspect, is very for these types of changes. And that's not the case with every individual on campus, right? And there's different needs that different offices serve on a campus. And one of the great examples, I think, of this was actually in the student financial space, where it's a very challenging space for students, right? A lot of first-time students are used to maybe getting an allowance at most, right? But now they're dealing with scholarships, work study, loans. There's a whole host of things, and it's very complicated. And we heard this again and again in our research. So we started to come up with designs and shared those with more students and iterated on those designs to really create a better experience where they could start to understand their finances. And then we would bring this to an early set of our customers and say, this is kind of the vision based on all the student research that we've done of how we'd like to present, how much a student owes, what's left for them to pay, where is their aid coming from. And a lot of the room was like, wow, this is the future. This is what we want to be presenting our students. But then where we meet that challenge is there's some people who kind of cross their arms in the room and go, how come there's no credits and debits column on this? And I'm sitting there going like, because for a student that's like Visa versus MasterCard, it doesn't mean anything to them. And we meet this attitude that, well, we're not supposed to handhold students in college anymore. This is their chance to become an adult, to grow up, learn the system. And my thought is, unless you're offering college credit to pay your bill, I don't think the learning opportunity is paying your tuition. A mantra I like to say is, getting a degree is hard enough. Figuring out how to get your degree should not be the hard part of getting your degree, and right now I think it is.
Yeah. So I think you can see the challenges that, there's the way we've always done things, and we have one perspective, but imposing that perspective on the student isn't necessarily the right way to go. So Dylan, when you find these people who are a little bit resistant or maybe have their arms crossed, how do you help them see the light, so to speak?
Yeah. So one of the things that we did was we created some of these customer programs where we brought in a lot of early customers from different types of institutions to share the pain points they were having and to validate the designs we are working with. And so that was helpful because then they start to hear from their peers that this is something that could work for an institution. And so it becomes a little bit more of a shared understanding of the direction that we're going in. Another thing that we did a lot of, though, was what we call usability research, where we'd actually send our usability team to meet with students from the specific customer's campus and show them our designs. And so, from R1 schools to community colleges to four-year privates, and of course, any one school would say, well, you interviewed students at this school, and our students are very different. Some people have even said to us, our students aren't that smart. They wouldn't know how to use that system. And I'm like, how are you saying your students aren't smart? You're educators. And then we'd go to their school and we'd do that usability research, and their students would have no problem with the system at all. So it really went to show with the design and bringing that design information back to the educators and the administrators I think that was really telling for them to see, okay, our students do understand this. This would work for our campus.
Yeah, I think the key here is to really engage the students and do as much usability studies as you can. And one of the things that I think we did that worked is we did usability studies all over the country. So as we would visit with, customers of ours, we would do usability studies on their campus. And we would do them with the students, we would do them with the faculty. And getting the students was a lot easier. All you needed was a Starbucks gift certificate. Getting the faculty was a little more difficult. They didn't respond to those sorts of things. But the research that we got was really, really invaluable. And I think when you can bring, as Dylan said, that research forward to the administrators or whomever you're designing your products to, if you can bring that usability research forward to them and show them these are the results, this is what your end users are telling us. We know that everyone has the end user, that's who they want to support. So you've got to provide that hard research data to show them these sorts of designs that you feel most comfortable with are failing with the students. And these sorts of designs are really resonating with them. And once you can do that, and especially if you share that research with a group of institutions, which we often did, would have clusters of subject matter experts that we'd share designs and research with, that they would start to create a little bit of peer pressure and saying, oh, you're right, we're willing to change, and then pretty soon others are willing to change as well. I think, as you know, I'm not telling you anything different, building new products and solving big problems is really hard. But we think it's worth the effort because the opportunity is big enough. So let's hear some thoughts on reinventing solutions, just starting from nothing, reinventing some things.
Yeah, so one of the leaders in our company recently said that data is the new oil. And I love that. I'm going to get it tattooed right here eventually. But I think it's absolutely 100% correct. And I think, at least in my experience with higher ed thus far, is that we're really just beginning to scratch the surface on what data can do for this industry. I was recently in the market for some soccer shoes, and I needed them quickly because I was lazy and bought them kind of late. And so I wound up with these neon green, very loud soccer shoes when I would have rather preferred something more generic. But if we think about it in terms of the seller, they might be looking at it as, hey, we sold another pair of lime green soccer shoes. By golly, we should keep making lime green soccer shoes, supply and demand. And if you stop at that surface level data, you're never going to get to those deeper intentions. You're never going to understand what the true picture is, that perhaps I had just procrastinated and that was the only color available in my size at that time. And if we take that example and say, look at course demand planning. If you look at last term, we had 50 students in this general art class. You might say, okay, well, we had 50 students take it last time, so we'll offer 50 spaces the next time it's around. And if you just stop at that surface level data, that's all you're going to get. But if you dig deeper and find out that maybe a subset of those 50 actually did want to take that class, but maybe you had a bunch of other students who were trying to graduate and they had a GE spot they hadn't filled up yet, and that art class was the biggest lecture room they could get into for a class that would fill that GE requirement. You dig deeper, you find out what those true intentions are, and you as the institution then can come to the middle and meet the students where they're actually trying to take a different variety of classes. You find out what the students' intentions are, what their needs and wants are, so that we can start looking into more things like student planning, predictive analytics, and not reacting after the fact. If we're going to paraphrase from the Declaration of Independence here, feeling patriotic because the president was here yesterday, those with the ability to take action have the responsibility to take action. If you have that data, if you can deepen that knowledge base and understand what the true intentions are, we can mutually, I think, do a lot better job of coming to the needs of the students of today.
Yeah, I think Michael's making a really good point, and I've been to a couple sessions already, and there's a lot of them, a lot of discussion around machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think we're to the point in time where we have the data, and I agree, data is really where it's at. And so I would encourage everyone to use the data that you have, look for the patterns in the data. To Michael's point with courses, I think one of the biggest, I sometimes call it the block blocks in the supply chain of getting students graduated on time is often the fact that they can't get the classes that they need. Well, we have the data. Collectively, we have the data to solve that problem. So, and this is just one example, and there's many, many of them. We have the data to solve student success issues. Where are certain types of students falling down, meeting challenges, and unable to persist or succeed when certain sorts of things happen either in their lives or, you can start to predict. So using the data that you have, especially if you're building products, capitalize on that data, what you know about that, that student using the product, and use it to help make that experience better, and also use it to help your customers make better decisions about how they're treating your customers, like the administrators paying the bills. Use that data to determine how they can better serve the ultimate end user, the student, because the data is really where it's at. And we've gotten to the point where we can do that now. Anyone, who else wants to go? Aditi?
Absolutely, and just to kind of build off that, I would say it's not just about throwing more technology at the problem or just using more of the latest technology, but it really is about using the right technology for your end user. If we take the case of Facebook versus Instagram, Facebook came first, and it had so much rich functionality. You could share posts, you could check into places, you could create events, share photos, and it had so much functionality that users never knew they needed from a social network. And then along came Instagram, and it was obviously much more streamlined and efficient. All you could really do with Instagram was share a square picture at first and either like or leave a comment on it. And that's the base functionality of Instagram. But now we see that more users, especially the younger crowd, is trending towards using Instagram more than they are using Facebook now. And even though that rich functionality is offered, it seems like people do want a simpler solution at times, and sometimes you do want that more elegant solution instead of having that information overload on those kinds of pages. And so you really have to think outside of the box as you're designing these solutions. You can't just throw everything you have at it. You really have to be strategic about your placement of technology. And some of the ways that we can think outside of the box is thinking about the way we hire people. On our team, I know that a lot of our development team is young. A lot of them are fresh out of college because they were recent grads. And who better to build a student system than students who've just recently gone through this process? And a lot of our product management team were registrars or consultants who were implementing this software, or administrators who had to use it. And so we're all really passionate about making a difference because we don't want other people to go through the horrors that we had to go through. And we're genuinely excited about making a change and breaking and disrupting this industry. And so you really have to have people who are curious about these kinds of things and question a lot of it. You don't want to do things the way they've always been done because it's the status quo. You really have to challenge it.
Now, obviously, questioning takes time, but it's worth the effort. I think one of the points that Dee Dee made is sometimes simpler is better. Less is more. We've all heard that. And granted, many applications, there needs to be a lot going on under the covers. And not everything we build is simple. There are complex processes, but again, think about how you can, even with the most complex process, focus down on the real core piece of functionality. Now, the end users or the people you're building the software for, they're always going to want more. We need more, more, more. We all want more, right? When we're building houses, we all want more. But when you get to that elegant design, oftentimes it really can serve the need. And if you have to build the detail, if you have to have the heavy lifting going on behind the scenes, try to minimize it from the end user as much as humanly possible. I think the app we're using here for this conference is a really good example of that. It's so easy to find things. You're not confused by just tons and tons and tons of features. So back to you, Aditi. How do you know when you're building a product that you're designing the next Instagram or really building that optimal solution?
Yeah, so I would say it ties back to what Dylan was mentioning with user research and what you were saying as well, and how we really have to just focus back on what the user wants and needs, and sometimes thinking about what they actually want to do. You can't just think that this is the problem they're trying to solve and you're just throwing a pre-existing solution at it. You have to be very cognizant and strategic about the customer's needs and wants and thinking about them in a more critical light as well. Just thinking about that.
Thanks. Dylan, anything you have to add to this?
Yeah, kind of building on a little bit of what you two were both saying about choosing the right technology and getting, the minimal solution. In product, we talk a lot about MVP, or the minimum viable product. And that's important, right, to be able to deliver a solution. You know, you have limited resources, so you have to spend them wisely. I think a lot of the challenges we're trying to solve, though, there's some kind of technically working solution in place. It maybe isn't a good solution, but I think it means that we have to focus on more than just a minimum viable product, because there probably is something viable already there. I was introduced to the concept of minimum lovable product, and I really liked that phrasing, because it isn't saying build everything, but focus on what is the minimum amount of functionality you would need to deliver to your end users to make them love switching to use whatever solution you're trying to provide. And really then when you want to hone in, because we all have limited resources, on how do you make something minimum lovable, you can't make something maybe minimum lovable for everyone. So who do you choose to make it minimum lovable for? And in our case, we think it's the students, our customers in this case. We think if we can make the system lovable from their perspective, it's going to make it be lovable for everyone's perspective.
Yeah, so I have a question here for you. Yeah, you talked about the people paying for the product versus the ultimate end user. How do you balance those needs? You know, how do you really achieve that goal?
Yeah, I think it takes time. One of the ways that we do it is we really embrace the agile methodology for developing software.
Any others using Agile in the room? Yeah, I would imagine quite a few. Great.
It's really successful, I think, and the premise of it is doing small chunks and getting constant feedback on your work. And so when we work with our early customers, we would collect information from them and then go back to our offices and we'd work on some functionality. And it wouldn't be finished by any means, but we'd then bring them that unfinished functionality and show them the progress we were making. And at first they were like, why are you showing us this? It doesn't do all the things we asked for. But we explained to them, we're showing you the direction that we're taking, and we're showing you how, based on this feedback that you're giving, this is the way we're trying to solve that problem. And they started to understand what we were saying. And eventually it starts to build this relationship of trust between us and the customers, where they know that our visions are aligned, and that even if we aren't today where they ultimately want to be, that we're headed in that direction together, and that we're listening to them, that we're understanding what their pain points are, what their student pain points are, and we honestly are trying to solve their problems. And so I think as you work with people, that's how you show them that even if this doesn't feel like it's exactly what you asked us to build, see how it's solving your problems and see how we're listening to your feedback to contribute to the solution.
So as you've heard, just a little bit of context, we've been working with quite a few higher education institutions. I think Dylan mentioned this. And we work with them really, really closely on a very frequent basis, or before we were delivering our first minimum lovable product, to get their feedback. So Dylan, you know, and one more thing about Dylan, I'm going to embarrass him now, but Dylan's been with the team from the very, very early days when we first started this venture. And the first thing I did when, you know, I began this project at Workday is hired some college folks that had experience in building the kinds of systems that we're building, student systems, with a lot of background. People more like myself, maybe looking a little bit closer to my age than Dylan is. And Dylan was someone who had been an intern at Workday in an early, what we call Generation Workday, right out of college. And he heard that we were building a student system, and he came knocking on my door. And I'm thinking, well, sure, I want to talk to this guy. And so he was pretty minimum lovable as well. And but the thing about Dylan is I thought, well, gosh, you know, he really doesn't have any experience. He's smart, obviously smart, went to a top-notch school. He's been killing it on the projects that he's working on, but those are in payroll. You know, how does that apply to what we're doing? And it was his persistence over and over that I said, he has some really good skills here, and I should talk to him. And so I ended up hiring Dylan, and he was the first product manager that was closer to being just out of school than the rest of us. And I have to say, it was the smartest thing I've done in the last 5 years, is hiring people like Dylan And there were many more that came after him. After that, it was like, this is my go-to move. I've got customers that know the business. I've got product managers that know the business. Why do I need more of those people? I need more people that are younger, smarter. They have been students. They have new ideas. They're using these mobile applications and some of these cutting-edge applications all the time. They always know how to make the AV work. They're comfortable with technology. So it really was the smartest thing I did. So now that I've embarrassed you, Dylan, and probably the rest of them, give us an example of how, tell us how, what are the critical elements that you use in terms of designing, those sort of user-centered design methodologies? Maybe give us an example of that or talk about that.
Sure. And I definitely have to say it's a partnership with people with experience, I think, that makes young people successful, because alone we could just be, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, or whatever the saying is. And so when you work with, whether it's people with experience on your team or people that are customers of yours, some of that design thinking, I think, is really constantly asking why, and keep on pushing that, and eventually, whenever you get to the answer of, because that's how we do it, it's probably not the right answer.
Uh-huh.
And I ran into that a lot, both with customers and people on our team. And what's great about the people on our team, whether they're more recent grads or people who have built systems in the past, they've been great about saying, well, all right, let's stop and rethink that. And one of my favorite examples is the way academic requirements are defined. We see a lot of requirements defined in a very, what I call, negative way, that's saying you can't take more than this number of courses pass-fail. You can't take more than this many courses from performance music courses. You can't take. It's like, what a horrible way to say what you do need to do to graduate. And so it's things like that where you're really just kind of continuing to push the envelope and not assume anything about why you're doing things the way they are. Don't use the way you've solved problems before. Think about really what is the root of what you're trying to solve, and just start there. And then if you end up at the same solution, maybe that was the best solution, but it's not necessarily the right way to do things.
Yeah, Dylan used a really good example of, for academic advising and dealing with, there's complex requirements. The video showed the big book. That's really not far from the truth, as many of you probably know. But my experience and experience of several others of us was, well, this is how the formulas have always worked. And so I said, what can they do? Can you show me, is that going to work? Show me the math, show me how we're going to do that with having, and it's easier for you to say this is what you can do as opposed to what you can't do. And it was one of those sort of breakthrough moments where, wow, that really is the better way. And it's much faster, and it's much more efficient on the back end. And it's much more user-friendly for the students. So it was a really smart choice to put what we knew aside and try something different. And I think, Aditi, you have a really good example about doing that with the area that you're working in. Maybe you could share.
Yeah, so recently we got a requirement from customers that they wanted to have this feature built called monthly student statements. So think of a student statement as just like a billing statement. So like what you might see in your bank accounts, just what they owe and all their charges and at what time they're due. And we had, to note, we had already delivered this statement, but in an academic period format, so students would get it delivered to them maybe by every semester or by every quarter. And if they logged into our app, they would already see that running total and what they owe information there as well. And so the product managers on my team, they got that ask for that monthly student statement, and then we took it to the drawing table. We're like, why do they need this? And talking to customers, it seems like they just wanted their students to get a way of knowing when their bills would be due before they were actually due. And with the monthly format, they'd be able to find that out much faster than if it was every quarter or semester. And they thought students didn't check their balance enough on the app. They just wanted some way for them to be able to see that more immediately. And monthly was the solution for this. And so they were even thinking about having it printed out or maybe emailed to the students in a PDF. And we thought the real ask there and the real problem there was that students weren't getting these notifications proactively enough. And so our solution and counter to that was we want to deliver a solution that allows students to get proactive notifications pushed to their phones. So every single time a charge may be due in 5 days, then students would be able to get that notification pushed to their phone based on how the admin configured it. And then students would immediately be able to, swipe on that and go to their account and pay their bills immediately. It wouldn't have to be this process where they either had to check their mail or check their email and sift through this statement where there might be a lot of different charges with different due dates. And so they were able to get that immediately. And so we were able to work with customers and convince them that this is actually the problem that we're trying to solve there.
Yeah, this is a really good example of the way it was done. Always had been done this way, and there was evidence to show from a legacy system that sending out these monthly paper bills, or hiring someone to service those bills and deliver them for you, they felt was really working. And it was hard for them to imagine giving that up. It was like a security blanket. Yet, if you look at your Amex or your Citibank or your credit cards, they're pushing you notifications around reminding you your bill is due, and you can look at what you already paid, you can look at your running total. So we really wanted to take a page out of, well, what are the consumer applications doing? And then we went back to the data with the research. The students that we'd done significant research with on how we designed the bill really understood the way we built it. We designed it based on their feedback, but it took some, careful discussions and kind of pushing back on a very important customer that I think in days past, I might have said, well, we better give them what they need. But we really held our ground, partly because you're resource constrained, but also holding true to the premise that we want to deliver a really elegant solution that meets the needs of the student. And sending more paper is not the way to reach the students. So that's just one small example, but I think the premise, and the story holds true across everything that you're going to run into. It's easy to say this is how we've always done it, but we have to reinvent. We have to just reinvent and really look at what is the data telling us and how can we do this, a little more simply. So we're just about out of time, so I'm not going to give Michael and Dylan, I think, a chance to say any more. But so in conclusion, I really want to thank all of you that took your time and have been such a great audience. Thank you very much. I hope we delivered on our promise to have you understand what our point of view is on how to really engage and reinvent a new system. I also want to thank the panel here. They've just been invaluable, and they're just great resources for us. And just once again, no matter what the size and scope of what you're building, what you're focusing on, whether it's an LMS, whether it's some piece of data analytics, it's something focused on the student or the faculty, hopefully you can take what we've shared with you and apply it to your own situation and go back and really question what you're building, who you're building it for, and given the technology that we have at our disposal today, mobile technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, really take the time and do the hard work to question who you're building this for and how can we do this in a much more modern and ideally delightful way for your end user. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, panel.